This is a different panel than I've had. Everything's computer. That's beautiful. Wow.
It's Britney, bitch.
And the Iraq, everywhere, like, such as.
I'm supposed to be the franchise player, and we're in here talking about practice.
Ladies and gentlemen, we got him.
Out, Charlie! Out!
Our next door neighbors are foreign countries.
I call upon all nations to do everything they can to stop these terrorist killers. Thank you. Now watch this drive.
Hey everybody, and welcome to Remember Shuffle. My name is Ben. With me as always is my co-host Giordano.
Cyber, I barely know her.
And today we are discussing cyber warfare. This topic is kind of like a spiritual sequel to our drones episode. We talked about drones because they were this novel, burgeoning change in our military capabilities that would change the nature of warfare, even though most of the drone program itself comes from the 2010s. And cyber warfare is a topic in the same vein. Most of the big cyber attacks happen in the 2010s, but this industry, this market, this technological development, all of that is birthed and grows during the 2000s.
I do think that there's an argument that this is more of a 2010s subject, but a lot of that is just because it's coming out in the 2010s, because it's a very highly secretive subject, right? Mm-hmm. And so you have something like the Stuxnet attack on Iran, right? Mm-hmm. Which comes out after computer scientists are able to see that, oh, hey, there's like this worm we discovered, and we're pretty sure it was used to attack a nuclear facility. That all gets developed, and like the attack is happening in the late 2000s. Same thing with like the Edward Snowden leaks, right? Everybody thinks of that as like a 2012, 2013, the whistleblowing event. Mm-hmm. But the events that Edward Snowden is describing are all happening in the 2000s. That entire apparatus for the state is created and grown in the 2000s.
Yes. We do not get cyber warfare without the political economy of the 2000s. And I think the three biggest trends and forces that birth this horrifying industry are the colossal lack of regulation of both tech and the internet, the U.S. national security state and its massive expansion after 9/11, and of course, the friggin' internet. I don't know if you've heard about this, Giordano, but the internet changed everything.
There's so many things that changed everything.
And the 2000s is the internetification decade. So before we get going, bibliographical note, the main source that we use in researching this episode is a book called This Is How They Tell Me the World Ends by Nicole Perlroth. I would say that it's fine. There are a lot of gems in the book, but it's also very repetitive. It's told non-linearly, so if you're minding it for a podcast that wants to tell the story chronologically, it's a little frustrating. And I would say the politics are very national security lib. The author really wants you to be afraid of America's enemies having cyber weapons, but she's kind of milquetoast and lukewarm on the fact that the American deep state has the colossal, potentially world-ending cyber weapons at its disposal. Like, that's fine. We're the good guys, you know?
Sometimes I just wanted like a little bit more realistic of a portrait of how big of a problem is this, mm-hmm. right? Like, this is how the world ends. The way that Nicole Perlroth talks about it, it's like, oh, this is the biggest problem of all time.
Yeah.
It's like, no, this is like a problem. It could be the biggest problem of all time,
mm-hmm.
I think is maybe a better framing.
This is how they tell me the world might end.
Yeah. We'll get into what we mean by that later.
Yes.
I think there are specific circumstances for why this could be a bigger problem.
You hit the nail on the head, Jordan. The book is very breathless in how it tells its story, in its tone. So before our history lesson, here are your key terms for cyber warfare. You know, listener, I'm a techno peasant. I can convert a doc to PDF, but that's about it.
You've almost mastered Google Drive, I think.
Yeah. According to the New Hacker's Dictionary, a hacker is, quote, one who enjoys the intellectual challenge of creatively overcoming or circumventing limitations. Nicole Perlroth says that hackers are just natural tinkers, right? If you've ever known a friend who's a hacker, they enjoy seeing how things work, breaking things down to their parts, and building them back up or finding alternate uses.
It's so interesting. She's describing a lot of like the ways that hackers find vulnerabilities. So often it seems to be just based on some edge use case that has like this very specific function in mind. you can find a way to use it for like other functions, right? So the fact that computers all connect to like a printer and can like send information on page size to the printer, exploiting that communication system to deliver small payloads and worms to each other.
As if we needed more evidence that printers are evil manifest. The things that always jam and break when you need them most, they're also one of the major cybersecurity liabilities. The fucking printers.
But yeah, I think in her words, she says that any system that is built by humans will naturally have vulnerabilities because you just have these people who can sit there tinkering away at the edges to see how can I deliver some input here that it's not expecting and see what access I can get to.
Apparently, the word actually goes all the way back to the 1870s when teenagers were caught tampering with the country's primitive telephone system, and they called them hackers. Maybe they were like, this is a hack bit. First you were doing it with the telegraph wires, now you're doing it with the new one. Talk about hacks. And yeah, well, most people are going to associate the hackers from movies with like black hats criminals. They're coming to steal your social security data or your fucking credit card number. Most of the world's progress in digital security is because of hackers, because of people who are frequently not even formally employed to do this, finding the flaws and flagging them to people. Another key term is vendor, which in this context is any big tech company that makes software or hardware. So Oracle, Microsoft, Sun Microsystems, Hewlett-Packard. They're going to be significant in our story because they're very slow to adapt. In the 90s and early 2000s, they're releasing all these shitty bug-ridden products because it's cheaper and their security is basically unregulated. They're not thinking about it. They also really, really hate hackers, even the white hat ones who tell them where the bugs are. Their mentality is nobody would know there were bugs there if you didn't point them out to people.
What a ridiculously short-sighted view of the world.
Yup.
Truly just burying your head in the sand.
And they would literally sue people for tampering rather than releasing better products or patching them. It was cheaper to take them to court than to just release better products. And of course, at a certain point, thanks to globalization and the tech oligopoly, everybody in the world is going to be running Microsoft or have a smartphone or whatever. So these vendors are going to play a very big part in our story, and eventually we're going to see them get burned and start to change. They get burned by the deep state, and they're going to start to give a shit about internet security in a way that the government does not. Another key term, a client, is basically anybody who buys from a tech vendor, right? So this includes any company that's going to be buying computers to run their business, but also importantly, government agencies rely on tech vendors. So I bring this up just because the government is also a client of these vendors. It does not take on the regulation that it probably should. And these clients, and then by extension, the consumers who use the products, they're the main casualties and victims of vendor negligence in our cyber warfare story. The most important key term for you to know, and one that I learned while researching this, is the idea of a 0 day. A 0 day, at the most basic level, is a software or hardware flaw for which there is no existing patch ready to go. The reason they're named that is because once the flaw is discovered, the vendors have 0 days to fix it. They're playing from behind. And so until the vendor learns where the flaw is, comes up with the fix, disseminates the patch to the users, and has the users run their software updates, everyone using that system is vulnerable.
So a 0 day, this term I thought was stupid sounding, but is something a 0 day until the vendor patches it, or it's a 0 day as soon as it's found? Like if I discover a 0 day vulnerability today, is it a 0 day vulnerability tomorrow if it's still unpatched?
Yes. Once the flaw is discovered by the vendors,
By the vendor?
Yeah. Your 0 day that you've found is basically worthless. Or could be basically worthless. Nicole Perlroth, in her classic breathless style of narration, say they are the blood diamonds of the cybersecurity trade.
I don't agree with that characterization, but well, blood diamonds, I guess, assumes that they were exploitatively mined. Right? Like they were acquired through exploitation. That's hence the blood.
Right.
That's not where these unless we're getting like children to find 0 day exploits through like a giant trial and error process.
Yeah. Not a perfect metaphor. I think she just means that they are high value things that are smuggled places.
Okay.
And so once a 0 day is found, it can be turned into an exploit that can be used by states or government agencies or cyber criminals or whoever. A more advanced exploit will require more time and resources to create that can only be produced by nation states, not just independent hackers. And we're going to see this with the Stuxnet worm that we'll be talking about eventually.
Yeah, that's another big change over the course of the 2000s. Is it really seems like in 2000, 2001, that was like setting an MLB record in the 1890s, right? Like in terms of how easy it would have been to hack into something. But by the end of the 2000s, there are state-funded actors working in conjunction. I think she compares some of the projects to being like the Manhattan Project.
Yes, because this is also all the low-hanging fruit gets picked. Tech vendors start to take it more seriously. It gets harder to find them. It gets even harder to develop them. It is truly an arms race. And there are a billion examples throughout the book of what a weaponized zero-day exploit can do. Here's just a smattering of examples with just the dumbest fucking names. Monkey Calendar was an exploit that relayed a target's geolocation back to the NSA via invisible text message. Picasso could do all that and hot mic a phone's microphone to eavesdrop on any conversations nearby. I'm surprised the Picasso zero day wasn't something about underage girls tracking them down. I don't know. Surly Spawn could grab keystrokes off of computers that were not even connected to the internet, and Drop Out Jeep was developed specifically for the iPhone, and it could do all the usual text, phone call, location monitoring, hot micing, and photo snapping, even when the iPhone was offline.
You mean my surly monkey internet browser tooltip helper is spying on me? I've definitely downloaded apps with far dumber names, and just doing this episode made me so much more skeptical of like, oh crap, that free fucking like video editing software I downloaded definitely is a liability.
Oh yeah, man. Reading this book put me in a real weird headspace, let me tell you. And then the last key term that I'll say is a boutique contractor, or sometimes just government contractors. So at a certain point in our story, we're going to see entire companies crop up that are creating their own cyber weapons and selling them to the US government. In the same way that Boeing or Lockheed Martin are defense contractors, and these companies also get in on cyber weapons, we see a rise of private firms, mostly centered around the Beltway of DC, making cyber weapons and selling them to the government. Often made up of ex-NSA guys, just a big-ass revolving door selling them back. So, hey man, it's the 2000s. A new military-industrial complex just dropped. Enjoy. New ways to embezzle taxpayer money on things that make the world a worse place.
Yeah, a few of these guys mentioned that the money was better, and I think some of them even mentioned that as like a private company, you got to work with less nefarious organizations
than working for the NSA.
Well, just in terms of like who you were dealing with as an agency, right? Like you could say I won't work with Saudi Arabia or something.
Yeah. So most of our episode here will be made up of this history lesson, a timeline of major events in the history of cyber warfare, how we get from point A to point B. And periodically we'll do little check-in retrospectives, because I really want to hammer home just how rapidly the world changed over the course of this decade. So we're in the 80s and 90s. We got to start way back here, if only for the NSA and CIA. At the height of the Cold War in the 60s, when it came to intelligence gathering, here's an example. It took 9 years for one CIA operative to secretly photograph 25,000 pages of classified Soviet military documents. Everything is analog. Everything is paper. But thanks to the NSA and the CIA and other scary three-letter agencies embracing technology, even before the internet, they have well-placed implants that could get you terabytes upon terabytes of data in a matter of minutes, even before we've connected everything to the internet. And here's why this matters. Here's why I went all the way back here. Our three-letter deep state agencies are going to be really well positioned for the great internetification of the world. They have a head start before the starting gun hits. They also have the problem of too much information. They can't sift through all the data efficiently enough at this point, you know? They miss 9/11. Assuming you're not a MyHop or a LIHOP, they miss it. In the mid-1990s, Mark Andreessen and Eric Bina create the first internet browser. 1994, Netscape launches, same guys. And from that point on, the internet population doubled each year, year over year over year. Why this matters? Microsoft, Bill Gates, the Jeffrey Epstein affiliated foreskin collector, he doesn't take the internet seriously. He thinks the future of computing is singular computers on singular networks. And Microsoft sacrifices security in exchange for speed because they really want to dominate the personal computer industry. They dismiss the internet as a science experiment. Morons, idiots. And this is going to come to bite Microsoft in the ass later. 1999 to 2002-ish, in this window, the dot-com bubble bursts. $5 trillion in paper wealth vanishes. We honestly could probably do an entire episode on the dot-com bubble bursting at some point.
Or the Y2K scare, which also happens in this year. But it's just a vision of our sort of like insecurities around how much of our society has become computer.
Yeah. Everything is computer now. And 2 years after that, more than half of all the dot-com companies would disappear. So finally, we get to our first little dip in the toe of cybersecurity and cyber warfare. This venture capitalist named John P. Waters, he's this Texas cowboy private equity guy. He buys his first cybersecurity company, iDefense, for a whopping $10. He does this in the summer of 2002. And so John Waters bought his company at a very opportune time because in 2001, 9/11 happens. It changes everything. And there's this big cyber weapons arm race for intelligence gathering. The taxpayer's checkbook is wide open for anything and everything NatSec state related. The annual intelligence budget surged up to $75 billion from just a few $1 billion before 9/11. Here's just some more numbers to really put this in perspective. The scale of information collecting is staggering. Pre-9/11, NSA implants is just a few hundred terrorists, a few hundred foreign officials from, the usual suspects, China, Russia, Pakistan, Iran, Afghanistan. After 9/11, there were quite literally millions of NSA implants around the globe. And when Nicole Perlroth interviews ex-NSA guys, they all tell her like, oh, that decade after 9/11, that was the golden age of spying. Because we get the Google search engine, which everyone is using, hack someone's Google search history, their entire life. You know the dumbest questions they've ever asked. You know their hypochondriac anxieties that you can exploit. We get Facebook and social media for the first time. People are uploading their entire lives to the internet. And of course, we got the smartphone, everyone's handy personal wiretap device.
Yeah, what a burgeoning space for cyber espionage. Mm-hmm. You're offering so much of your life into this space.
2002, Bill Gates finally sees the writing on the wall. He writes in a memo that security would become Microsoft's top priority. And Microsoft had been such a joke for so long that people laughed off the trustworthy computing initiative as some kind of elaborate prank or joke because they'd been slapping together such sloppy software riddled with holes for years. But long-term down the road, this would make Microsoft the tech company that hackers had the least disdain for, eventually. Also in 2002, and we're going to get back to John Waters in a second, don't forget him, there's mildly interesting snapshot of this dude named Desautel. He would later go on to become this massive zero-day broker, quite literally a middleman, putting hackers in contact with three-letter deep state agencies. He finds a bug in some HP software just in his spare time. He worked at a security firm, a cybersecurity firm, but he was tinkering in his spare time. He finds the HP bug. HP threatens to sue him under computer crime and copyright laws. He hires a lawyer, force the company to retract his threats, apologize. He sets a new precedent for how companies should approach vulnerability resource. He realizes that there could be a black market here for bugs. When he makes $16,000 in a black market deal for a 0 day from a mystery caller. Someone just calls him up because he works in security, says, hey, what are you working on? And he says, oh, I found this little 0 day. And he says, how much do you want for it? He says $16K as a joke, and he gets paid. Totally like under the table, the check comes, he gets it. And so he had this legitimate cybersecurity firm, he dabbled in this, and he eventually would go on to become one of the biggest brokers in this black market. Perlroth said the market was him at a certain point. But let's get back to John Waters with iDefense. He buys this little rinky-dink tech company for $10 after the dot-com bust. And iDefense becomes the first company to publicly open its doors to hackers and to start paying bounties for 0 day bugs. Little do they know, because of the thing I just said, there's also a burgeoning black market. But this is an attempt to make it a legitimate business. He starts at $75 a pop because there's no market to mark to. They have no idea what anything is worth. There's no competitive program that he's at least aware of. Half of the bugs that get submitted were absolute trash, but the business geniuses at iDefense knew that they had to cultivate loyalty and trust with all their independent hacker contractors. And it worked. Hackers who were like small scale famous on the web, who had never received a penny for their work, in fact had been repaid with threats of litigation, are finally getting paid by this third party, right? He sees his niche in the market. The vendors are selling bad products. The clients are getting hosed. Here's my opening of cybersecurity. And the best way to do it is to pay the independent contractors across the world to produce bugs. And so by 2005, he sells this company that he bought for $10 for $40 million because he got priced out of the market that he helped create. And he got priced out of the market by shady government contractors and independent brokers like Desautel's, middleman specialists who can put independent hackers in contact with the shady government agencies who will pay you duffel bags full of cash.
So basically, we have this firm that is doing what the vendor should have been doing, which is offering money to people who report bugs to them. Because a lot of people who find these hacks, they aren't necessarily looking to sell it to the NSA or something, but it's like there is no one else to sell it to, really. It's like either you sell it to a government agency or like a terrorist organization, and that's it. The company won't give you any money. And so it's like, okay, at least I can get some money from this iDefense organization or like a third party. But at this point, that's going away, right? They're getting priced out. The offers for zero-day exploits are so much higher on this black market than they are through any like legitimate means.
And a bunch of these hackers probably don't want to sell to bad people, as the show Silicon Valley loves to roast Silicon Valley for. They want to make the world a better place with computer, but there was no avenue for them to do it yet.
The irony here is that your first question would be like, why wouldn't someone like the US government want to regulate the market for these tech vulnerabilities, right? And like create some kind of system for handling paying people to notice things that can be exploited? And the answer is that like they're one of the primary buyers.
Ding, ding, ding.
They have no interest at all in limiting the amount of vulnerability because they're one of the main people buying these information. Once one person buys this, the value of it to a second person is greatly diminished because you really only get like one use out of this thing typically before it's noticed and patched.
You're selling secrets. You're selling a secret.
Yes. Once it's not a secret, it's useless. You got to pick your spots with these vulnerabilities.
Yeah, the counterfactual, if you want to be obtuse and be like, well, Ben and Jordana, what should the US government have done? And like my answer is like a Food and Drug Administration for big tech. That's my answer. It's like, listen, man, the whole world depends on your fucking programs. You gotta stop releasing these shitty fucking programs. We will compel you through taxes and incentives to pay the hackers to find the bugs so that you release better products. But in the cost-benefit analysis of the national security state, the espionage benefits were seen as greater than the risks that were presented, and that's what they chose. 2007, we got this guy named Zero Day Charlie. He's a former NSA hacker who publishes an article called The Legitimate Vulnerability Market, Inside the Secretive World of Zero-Day Exploit Scales. He sees that there's a huge problem with the black market. He's trying to be some kind of whistleblower. Where are the 0 days going? Who are they going to? Are people getting ripped off? The answer to that last question is an emphatic yes. He's got a pretty interesting Wikipedia page. This dude like hacked the computer in a Jeep and could like make it do shit. And he tries to do everything above board. There's a bunch of NDAs when you leave the NSA. He publishes a paper. He's trying to bring some legitimacy to this market. But 0 Day Charlie is not successful.
I mean, this is also the plot to Die Hard 4. It sounds like the villain in Die Hard 4 is 0 Day Charlie. Check out our upcoming Patreon episode, by the way, on Die Hard 4, which uses a lot of the plot points of these stories into the Die Hard universe.
So let's get to 2007. This is our major event in the history of cyber warfare. This is the event that they describe as pre and post this thing. This is the Stuxnet attack on the Iranian nuclear program. It's 2007. The Israelis are nagging George W. Bush about bombing the nuclear enrichment plant at Natanz. There's no diplomatic option. The Bush administration doesn't want war. They want a third option. So Keith Alexander, the NSA's techno wizard, in Nicole Perlroth's words. He pitches a third way, which is the largest cyber warfare attack of our decade.
Just to set this up, too, we should mention that the reason that the United States is compelled to do a cyber attack on Iran is because Israel really wants to bomb Iran. And the United States is like, no, we just actually lost like the most troops ever in Iraq last year. We'd rather not. There's a civil war there. And Israel's like, come on, bomb them. And they start flying essentially like practice runs from Tel Aviv to Cyprus because it's like the same distance, indicating to the United States, like, we're going to do this whether you like it or not. And so they're forced to do this cyber attack to sort of like placate the Israelis and be like, no, don't do the bombing. We have this other option for you. It is crazy that we allow ourselves to be bullied by the Israelis so much.
Yeah. People in the Bush administration probably wanted to do this anyways, but this keeps going under Obama.
Yeah, true.
So here's the beat by beat. There's a super secret organization of the NSA that they denied existing for a very long time called the TAO, the Tailored Access Operations. I do think is a Warhammer 40K reference, even though everybody hates on the TAO. These guys had actually already been on the case for years. They have the floor plans of the Natanz nuclear facility, thanks to some viruses that are designed specifically to look for AutoCAD files, basically blueprints. So then once they have the blueprints, they can note any common Iranian operating systems, applications, functions, features, and code, and then they can start stockpiling the 0 days for those things. All of this info gathering had been done for normal espionage, right? Just like gather intel. But Keith Alexander realizes that we can do more than just gather intel. We can do a cyber warfare attack on the program and use hacking to actually sabotage infrastructure. Nicole Perlroth sometimes calls it like a kinetic cyber attack, which I roll my eyes at.
Well, it is a kinetic cyber attack, though, right? You're going to cause the centrifuges to like spin too fast and break. Like, it is fundamentally different from just a cyber attack that like makes a software inoperable, right?
So here's how it works. Iranian nuclear enrichment uses centrifuges, these devices that spin at supersonic speeds, like more than 100,000 RPM. Is what they can do.
Wow.
The weak links in the centrifuges are, of course, the spinning rotors. They're fragile, they're fickle, they got to be light, they got to be strong, they got to be well balanced, they got the ball bearings to reduce the friction. And so, like, naturally, these things break all the time regularly just due to natural accidents. Like Giordano said, a key idea in this episode is that the more complex a system made by humans is, the more weak points there are. And so these centrifuges are controlled by specialized industrial computers called programmable logic controllers, PLCs. And the NSA chief pitches a cyber attack that's going to specifically target these centrifuges while making it look like an accident. This will keep the Israelis from bombing Iran, and it will keep the Iranians from figuring out what happened. Operation Olympic Games is a go. How they get in is absurd. It's on April 8th of 2008, which is Iran's National Nuclear Day. Mahmoud Ahmadinejad invited reporters and photographers on a personal tour of Natanz. He's showing it off. Hey, look at these centrifuges. Look at this.
That's bad OPSEC, man.
They got cameras snapping the whole way. And he walks the reporters past the 3,000 spinning centrifuges. And the NSA guys are like, oh, sweet. We know the make and model.
Iranian nuclear scientist Homer Simpson. And over here are centrifuges.
Death to the great Satan. So they need two things. They need a way in to bypass any antivirus security protocols. They need to know everything about every computer inside the building and how the computers are connected to the PLCs. And they also need to draft something up with their lawyers to make sure that the attack is targeted, surgical, clinical. Because these machines, these PLCs, they're using everything from spinning cotton candy to the brake systems on roller coasters. They're using auto and chemical plants around the world. Could you imagine how bad it would be if this thing got out? If someone was hurt in a tragic cotton candy incident?
That would never happen. No. In a tragic cotton candy accident, it's spinning out of control. 40 people dead at the Iowa State Fair.
I don't know what happened. The cotton candy machine just started spinning at 1,000 revolutions per minute. So, yeah, they had to be discreet. No fingerprints, no accidental misfires. The code needed to be dormant, silent, undetected over time. Don't blow the cover. I will say this for Nicole Perlroth. Her book is kind of breathless and overdramatic, but the cloak-and-dagger, Jean Le Carré stuff, it kind of got me. It was pretty cool.
Well, yeah, I mean, the reason they have to stay secretive too is because of the nature of what they're doing is so novel, right? And we'll talk about this more later when we talk about how this is a new space for attacking foreign countries that like doesn't require congressional approval. And also this is one state attacking another through a cyber program. And so it's like once you let the genie out of the bottle here, this is a thing now, right? That people can do.
Yeah, Nicole Perlroth compares getting all of this right to like the Manhattan Project.
It's more like the Staten Island Project.
So we still don't know who brought the worm in, and we won't know until 2039 when it's declassified. But the top suspects include a Mossad spy, a CIA officer, a Dutch mole, some kind of well-paid insider, or my favorite, an unwitting contractor at one of the 5 Iranian contractors that they chatted with. I want to believe that a CIA guy didn't like disguise himself and physically go in there. I like to think it was just all a big accident, because what we do know for certain is that if it wasn't an actual spy, some absolute fucking moron plugged a mystery thumb drive into a computer at the top secret uranium enrichment facility. Like, find a thumb drive in the parking lot. Ooh, I wonder what's on this guy. Plugs it in.
There had been an attempt to hack into an Iranian nuclear facility earlier, and then as a result, they just closed it off from the internet.
Yes.
There was like I think something called like an oxygen wall between the nuclear science system. And so you have to get in there somewhere. And so we don't actually know how the tiny worm got in, but these are one of the 5 things that people have speculated.
Yeah.
And the funniest one definitely is just like leaving it in a parking lot of a nuclear facility, a thumb drive, and waiting for fucking Homer Simpson to be like, ooh, what is this? Plug into computer for pornography or something.
No, that's a great point, that like Stuxnet wasn't the first attempt on this site. And there's a very important lesson here, which is, you know what the best cyber defense is? Unplug it from the fucking internet. So Stuxnet was made up of 7 zero-day exploits, 4 in Microsoft stuff and 3 in the German Siemens software inside of the PLCs. 500 kilobytes. So 100 times the kilobytes required to send Apollo 11 to the moon. Small file. 0 day 1 jumps from the thumb drive onto the computers. It's just a little LNK file. It's the thing that shows the icons on a thumb drive. 0 day 2, anytime someone hits print on a Windows computer, the worm can jump to the network that the printer accesses. Don't ever print, listener. Ever. 2 more Windows 0 days were used to take control of each machine it infected, while the worm looked for the specific computers that controlled the PLCs. And the worm used a tried and true hacking technique, which was trying the default password issued by the manufacturer, which is usually admin or password. And with that, they were in.
To link these 0 day exploits on top of each other is so interesting, right? Like you start with just like a little foot in the door where it's like, okay, it's going to have to read this LNK file just to show you what the icon on the thumb drive looks like. Let's put something in that icon picture that it'll have to read so it'll be visible. And then from there, we can stack these on top of each other.
Yeah, so once it gets in, it's looking for the PLCs that control clusters of 164 centrifuges, because they knew that that's how the Iranians grouped them in. That's the number that they chose. And until Stuxnet, there had never been a worm that worked on both a PC and a PLC, because the 2 machines are completely different. They have their own operating systems, languages, microprocessors even.
Microprocessors.
Micro what?
Microprocessors.
Microprocessors.
But they have these 7 0 days that are able to do it. So how the worm works is, first it does nothing, just monitors the speed of the centrifuges. Once 13 days has passed, they spin the rate up to 1400 hertz, which is like 300 above the max. Then everything's chill and normal for more or less a month, 27 days. And then after a month, it would slow the centrifuges down to 2 hertz, then go back to normal, then go dormant again for a month. So it's all about causing industrial accidents while also not being spotted.
Part of that, the period where they're not doing anything, is recording what normal activity looks like so they can play that back to the reader. And so like if the Iranian nuclear scientists are looking at it, it's kind of like that scene in Ocean's 11 where they like film a fake bank vault and then show that as security footage, right? As like the live feed. Because if you look at it, you're like, all the rotations are normal. I mean, maybe there's some scientists being like, I swear it's going faster. But if you look at the readings, it's the regular number of hertz.
Yeah. And yeah, it worked. By the start of 2010, so like 2 years after they had deployed the thing, the worm had destroyed basically a quarter of Natanz's centrifuges. The Iranians are starting to lose confidence in the whole program. The computers are telling them everything's working normally. And eventually, the worm escaped. We don't know how. Maybe someone plugged in their personal laptop in at the secret Iranian nuclear enrichment facility.
I think that's the best guess for what they think happened is, somebody brought their personal computer to work and it got onto that computer.
Someone's like, I just can't learn the new operating system. Could you let me bring in my MacBook?
There are no good games on here.
So it infects tens of thousands of machines, boomeranging back even on the US company Chevron, because lots of people use the PLCs that make stuff spin.
Yeah, this part was fascinating to me because like after it destroys a quarter of the centrifuges, it just still exists. There's no like auto shutdown feature to this worm. And so like eventually it gets out into the real world and it just sits there and idles. And like the way they set it up is that it would only ever affect a specific type of program, which was the PLC. And so it would look for systems that were controlling 128 devices at the same time, because I think that's the way that the centrifuges were configured, right? And so there's all these great stories in 2012 where people are starting to notice this weird worm, Stuxnet, but not really sure what it does. And so scientists in like Belarus and Russia, and there's a computer scientist, they put it in a lab and they're just watching it. And they're like, it's not doing anything. Like we put cheese, quote unquote, meaning like a system it could fuck up, and it's avoiding it. And then finally they figured out that if you put your system in charge of like 128 things, then it will fuck with it. But it's interesting observing a worm like this in a computer lab and being like, come on, like do something, like trying to just see like, what is this thing? We don't know where this file came from. Yeah. But yeah, it goes all over the world and starts to wreak havoc with cotton candy. If you were in a cotton candy accident in 2012, it was almost certainly because of Stuxnet.
And the nice little cherry on top, there's one theory, because they obviously never wanted this thing to get out at all. When it hits the press in 2010, so like 2 years after it first gets there, the Americans, their initial plan is like, let's just blame the Israelis. Let's say it was all them. But they knew that they couldn't keep this hidden forever. And so they're kind of pissed off. How'd this get out? One theory is that the Israelis tweaked the worm so it would move even faster. They weren't happy enough with only the quarter of the centrifuges being destroyed. They wanted even more destruction. And when they tweaked it, that's how it got out. That's how people saw it. Joe Biden was briefed on this whole thing, and he is reported to have said, Giordano, take it.
Son of a bitch. That sick son of a bitch. That is twisted. Sorry, it's young Joe Biden.
Yeah, so he's Paul Giamatti. It's got to be the Israelis. They went too far. So that's your big AAA game cyber warfare attack of the 2000s. Your blue ribbon, your A1 Wagyu, whatever the fuck top tier one is.
Yeah, it just encapsulates so many of the things that we're talking about, right? Which is, one, it's being done by the national security state. This is the reason why we don't have a regulated system for reporting bugs and vulnerabilities, is because they need to collect a bunch of good ones or appropriate ones, right, for their own operations. This is one that we know about because it got loose and like started wreaking havoc all over the world. A lot of times, Nicole Perlroth was frustrated with the amount of information out there because, if you have any friends that are hackers, you know that they're like incredibly secretive people. Very rarely do they speak to journalists. They always have anonymous names. But the other big story from the 2000s, which I think will also be a huge portent of things to come, is the 2007 cyber war on Estonia. This, I feel like, barely made the news in North America, but I think has some interesting parallels to our recent episode on the DDR too, in that Estonia, former Soviet Republic country, in the Baltics, in 2007 is doing a renovation of its town square in the capital. And so as part of that, they're moving a Soviet era statue to a local cemetery, I think a mile away. But like many certain people in America with Confederate statues, the ethnic Russians are very angry about the moving of a statue, right? And 30% of their capital, Tallinn, is ethnic Russian, right? right? It's a sizable minority in Estonia. It's a small country. And so Estonia, who throughout the 2000s is a country that was like digitizing its infrastructure, right? I'm sure you've all heard that they can pay taxes online, where they could do that very early. They're at the forefront of bringing government services like IDs, voting, healthcare systems, banking onto the internet. And so the Russian government, who's upset about these fucking statues being moved, decides to launch a cyber attack on Estonia because they're all riled up about the history being erased or whatever. It's actually the most primitive type of cyber attack, which is a DDoS attack, where you basically just like flood someone with requests so much that they can't handle any of the traffic and they break down. And so Russia sent out a message to basically anyone saying, "Do you want to help your motherland to fight fascism? You can do so by posting these simple lines of code into your terminal program. No need to be a hacker or a programmer." And so this was just like a few lines of code that would set your computer up to just repeatedly ping Estonian websites, government services, etc. And so like university profs were setting all the university computers to do this, regular people. This was like one prong of a three-pronged attack that also included, skilled hackers and botnets. But the banking sector went down. The program that facilitates 911 calls went down. And in conjunction with this, the Russian government also stoked flames and like encouraged people, like ethnic Russians, to do riots in Tallinn. And so kind of causing this giant civil disturbance via cyber warfare, but also cyber influence. And like one of the best parts too is, unlike a traditional attack with like soldiers and tanks, you have plausible deniability, right? You can say, we're not doing this.
Yep.
This is a grassroots movement of regular people.
Famously, when there was a Trump-Putin press conference back in Trump 1 during the Russiagate stuff, a journalist asked something about hacking the election, and Trump did the plausible deniability where it's like, what, some 400-pound coder sitting on his couch or whatever? Like, he was doing the plausible deniability for the Russians, who also were doing it.
Yes. That hacker figure in your mind, the 400-pound guy in his parents' basement in the Die Hard movie, is played by Kevin Smith.
Hell yeah.
But I think the important note here, because this Estonian incident, I think, is indicative of things to come more than it actually mattered, in terms of historical importance, because what we'll see in the next 15, 20 years is that Russia will use cyber attacks as like one of its primary offensive techniques, right? It has like a comparative advantage, I think, in hacking. And so the United States has this soft underbelly that you can exploit. It has shut down a ton of infrastructure, electrical and power in its war with Ukraine. And so it's this thing that happened in the 2000s that I think very much was a sign of what military capabilities in the future will look like. It's been true, right, in the war in Ukraine.
Back to our history lesson. 2008, we are going recursively back a little bit. 5 of the best hackers at the NSA, nicknamed the Maryland 5, leave the NSA. They're each a member of the premier Tau Access hacking team to found a boutique defense contractor. That was one of our key terms at the top of the episode, because they noticed that their employer, the NSA, was paying way more for zero-day exploits from outside than they were paying for ones that were made in-house. So they found VRL, Vulnerability Research Labs.
Vulnerability Research Labs. We're going to find all the zero-day vulnerabilities.
See, I read it and I just had like the therapy pilled language in my mind. It's like, we're going to learn how to practice vulnerability. Okay. We're going to be raw. We're going to be real. We're not going to run from our emotions and hide in shame.
We can get more money for this stuff on the black market. This is what I'm assuming the Maryland 5 sounds
Of course.
like.
Yeah. So these guys' entire business model is about having one client, the US government, and selling them cyber weapons. And they sound like absolute fucking losers. They have a Sun Tzu quote as their motto: "Know thy enemy and know thyself. In 100 battles, you will never be in peril." Should I call the super hackers losers on the pod? Am I going to end up hacked?
It seems like a pretty tight-knit organization. One of the employees gave another employee a kidney.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. True. Yeah, that was wild. Yeah, it's described as the anti-Silicon Valley. There's no fucking ping pong tables at VRL. Yeah, the premise behind this burgeoning industry that we get by the late 2000s is that the government has been paying for 0 days on this black market, and it is a feeding frenzy at this point. Certainly post Stuxnet, every state is going to get in on this. And it's a pain in the ass to find a 0 day. It's an even bigger pain in the ass to weaponizing it. And then testing it and making it reliable is the biggest pain in the ass of all. That's quoting Nicole Perlroth directly, maybe quoting one of these guys. So VRL is going to do all of the above. Now, here might be a great time to do a quick history check here. 3 years ago from now, right, in 2005, iDefense was paying people for bugs at $75 a pop. Now there are firms that are weaponizing the bugs and selling them to the government. The business and market has fundamentally changed. These are multi-million-dollar 0 days that they are creating. We've gone from like $75 to find a little bug in Microsoft Word or whatever to multi-million-dollar deals to find an exploit and sell it to the NSA.
The $1 million bug that makes Clippy gay.
So part of the reason for this like massive increase is that the vendors like Microsoft, they start to take cybersecurity more seriously. In 1998, a hacker could discover a 0 day in the morning, weaponize it in the afternoon. But now it took way more time, man hours. We're talking stuff measured in months. And VRL and other boutique contractors like it enabled the deep state to play where a government agency couldn't. The VRL could buy a 0 day from a foreign vendor and then weaponize it. And sometimes they even outsource. They'll be like an Imagineer, an ideas guy. They'll come up with an idea. They'll outsource their idea for a spy gadget to a foreign hacker who will make it happen. And then they'll sell that product back to the US government. And by this point, 2008, this private contractor had more advanced cyber capabilities than the vast majority of countries on the globe. And it is completely unregulated and completely unaccountable. The only regulation, such as it is that these guys say they only want to sell to the US government. It's just their personal code is the only regulation in place. What could go wrong? And I got one more story from this year related to VRL boutique contractors, right? So in 2008, there's this big US defense contract with the UAE, American ally, the United Arab Emirates. It's initiated by Richard Clark. He's a former U.S. counterterrorism czar under Bill Clinton and George W. Bush. He's going to help the Gulf monarchies develop their own terrorism tracking technologies. It has an interesting name. It's called Project Dread, short for Development, Research, Exploitation, and Analysis Department. Like, are we the baddies?
This was what was so funny about VRL. They're talking about how they have a code, you know, like they don't necessarily want to sell to bad people as just like regular computer geeks in America. But their friends who work for the NSA just sold Project Dread to the Gulf monarchies. Like, when thinking about like my own personal ethics and code, if this is what the government is doing, like surely what I want to do is ethical.
So yeah, this program uses the US-based subcontractors. There's one named Cyberpoint, that's a big one, to do spying for the UAE. And so they're poaching crazy talent, ex-NSA guys. They found their own boutique contractors. And then the State Department asks if this subcontractor wants to come to the Emirates. And the Emirates are saying, come, make a ton of money, help a close US ally. Dubai is great, whatever. It's some real cloak-and-dagger shit. They're given 2 folders, one with the real orders and one with the fake orders. The real orders is that officially you're there to help the UAE defend against cyber threats, right? You're an IT guy. Make sure our network is shipshape.
Right, or look for terrorists,
yeah.
Right?
Unofficially, they were there to hack into terror cells and foreign networks on behalf of Emirati clients. They mostly wanted to hack Qatar. They were just getting involved in the game of Thobes, is what Nicole Perlroth calls it. These Gulf monarchies jockeying for power. And so let's be clear here. Even though this wasn't like an official US government policy for them to do it, they have plausible deniability, right? The State Department sent you there to help them with their tech. But the NSA has these really strict rules about what its ex-employees can and can't do. So this program had unofficial approval. Put in other words, a president didn't order this, but it did get cleared by the NSA. And so these expat Americans just end up hacking Qatar on behalf of the Emirates. They also used it to spy on Emirati citizens. These Emirati citizens were arrested and jailed and thrown into solitary confinement for daring to criticize the government in private correspondence. And much, much later, one of the guys who was working at Cyberpoint or whatever, he ends up hacking Michelle Obama, where Michelle Obama was coming to Jordan and the Emirates in 2015, and he ended up with every email sent by the Michelle Obama team. And this one guy had like a come to Jesus moment and left. But the Emiratis eventually spin off this company into a different one called Dark Matter, all caps, offering buyouts to people so that they can do even more nefarious hacking with less regulation than even the tepid, seal of approval letter they got from the State Department.
And this is actually where I think some of the most impactful changes to our world were made by cyber warfare and cybersecurity, because I was criticizing Nicole Perworth earlier, who was saying that, hey, listen, all of our electrical and civil sewage systems are now vulnerable to a cyber attack. And we know that the counterfactual there is, well, we haven't been attacked. There's actually a few in the country that have gone down temporarily, but the one that I use every day hasn't been attacked. And so I can point to that and be it hasn't really affected my life all that much, these cyber vulnerabilities. But I don't actually know which dissidents in the Gulf countries were hacked and how history was affected by the Arab Spring, our own former NSA guys hacking into dissidents and using cyber warfare as a tool of control during the Arab Spring might have affected the world.
Yes, these spying tools are a tool of political reaction, as we will see when we talk about Pegasus shortly. And just to give you another scale check, 2009, the Obama administration creates a dedicated cyber command at the Pentagon. Let's talk military-industrial complex. The cyber command budget would triple in 3 years, $7 billion in 2012. As of 2020, there are 14,000 people working in cyber command. This is a booming gold rush industry of warfare. Still in 2009, let's check in with our boy 0 Day Charlie. There's just one interesting thing that happens here. He's at a hacking conference, one of these major security sites. And at this point, we haven't checked in on a relationship between vendors and hackers yet, but this is a big watershed moment because after winning the hacking conference, he and his teammates, I guess, they just start chanting no more free bugs. By the late 2000s, most hackers are absolutely done giving away bugs for free. The black market's been going on for a while. The vendors still aren't treating them right. And the main beneficiaries of the no more free bugs movement are, in fact, government contractors. Vendors, out of the picture. They don't want to pay the hackers. Your little companies like iDefense, they're gone. They've been priced out. Black market is about to flourish.
I guess they've benefited the most because bugs can stay as 0 day bugs. They won't be reported to the vendor.
Exactly. They won't be reported and patched. 2009, there's a major attack on a bunch of American tech firms called Project Aurora. A certain Middle Kingdom hacks Google in the early days of Google trying to get into that country. They're trying to get Google's source code so they can monitor various dissidents and Google users, right? Everybody's using Google for everything. And the reason that Project Aurora is this major watershed moment, it's in late 2009 into 2010, is one of the first times that a nation state is hacking a major private firm instead of nation state v nation state or nation state v individual terrorist or what have you. And this is a moment that everyone in Silicon Valley remembers. Is one of those things where this is going to spur our major tech vendors into starting their own pay for bugs programs. Google does it. I think Facebook does it. I think Twitter gets in very, very, very late. And they're paying good money. A really good bug will earn you $1,337 because it spells leet. And then, as prices keep going up, eventually it becomes 3-1. It's elite. They had a 3 at the beginning. That's the max payout that you can get.
Yeah, here now it's up to $8,008,135.
Hell yeah, brother. But yeah, this is the moment where the tech companies realize that the government is not going to step in to help you because the national security state benefits from a deregulated tech company. So security is in your own hands. 2010, Stuxnet is finally discovered. It's in the news. It's in the front page of the New York Times. We're now living in a post-Stuxnet world. Really opens the floodgates for other countries trying to buy cyber weapons. And we'll talk about this more in our themes and big ideas, but there's a big equaling of the playing field that happens. Once you can sell to anyone, to Iran, to Brazil, to Russia, to China, to independent contractors, whatever, when every country's trying to get in on it, it opens up opportunities for you if you're willing to sell to anybody.
Wow, yeah, the demand for 0 day bugs just went up by a globalized amount.
2011, there's a fascinating story involving a spyware program called Pegasus that is developed/deployed by an Israeli firm called NSO. Now, here's what you need to know about NSO, listener. It is a firm that has no corporate website whatsoever. but it is mentioned on the Israeli Ministry of Defense website. Do with that information what you will. The tech was almost certainly originally developed by graduates of Israel's Unit 8200. That's an elite intelligence unit. And two fucking high school buddies, Shalev Julio and Omri Lavier, marketed this tech to cell phone companies. They said, this is a great way to troubleshoot your customers' problems remotely, and very obviously a way to hack people. I was thinking like two high school buddies, like, Giordano, this could have been you and me. Instead, we're just doing Paul Giamatti impressions on the internet.
Right. We need to make the Paul Giamatti app on people's phones that also allows you to record all of their GPS locations and conversations.
Yep. Pegasus has some great timing since it's the early 2010s. Everybody's getting a smartphone, right? And most smartphones encrypt, do a lot of encryption, but they don't encrypt at the endpoints. And this was Pegasus's workaround, hacking the phones themselves rather than, I don't know, wherever the data goes to. And Pegasus is fucking absurd as a bug. Here are the things it can do, right? It can capture the phone calls, the text messages, the emails, the contacts, the calendar appointments, the GPS location data, Facebook, WhatsApp, and Skype conversation that's happening on the phone. It can also do what they called room tap, which is to gather sounds, snapshots in and around the room using the phone's microphone and video camera. It was battery conscious because one of the big signs that you have malware on your phone is that it drains your battery real quick. So it would turn itself off to avoid alerting the hacking victim that their phone was compromised. And they somehow developed a zero-click over-the-air stealth installation. You don't even need to click the link like a moron.
Imagine like your cell phone isn't working. And so you call Verizon or whatever, and they're like, well, in order to see what's going on your end, we have to install this Pegasus app so that we can monitor and troubleshoot this with you. Mm-hmm. And this Pegasus app is just like straight up a company founded by the Israeli military to make your phone into a spying device.
Yup. And to make money, because the money that changed hands for Pegasus was equally absurd. They charged a flat $500,000 installation fee, then $650,000 for your first 10 smartphones, an additional 100 targets for $800,000. So Mexico ended up paying $15 million worth of hardware and software and paid NSO $77 million to track, quote, a large array of targets. Now, ostensibly, Mexico was buying Pegasus to deal with drug dealers, cartels. In reality, thanks to the good folks in the newsroom, we found that they were mostly targeting journalists who were opposed to the government, dissidents, and hilariously, advocates for Mexico's new soda tax. If you were a proponent of the soda tax, you would get harassed on your phone and you would be monitored and intimidated because of the Pegasus
Okay,
app.
so maybe Pegasus was actually good. I mean, they're fighting the soda tax. I'm okay with Pegasus when it's for stuff like this.
Sure,
to spy on anti-soda political dissidents.
We can't go into all the details. There were more leaks in the late 10s and early 20s that tried to unpack the sheer scale of spying that Pegasus enabled.
Do you know their original business model, like with the cell phone providers? Like, was it one of those things where it's like, oh yeah, we'll actually make this app for you for free because we're making all this money later on down the road?
Check out the Wikipedia article on the Pegasus project and all of the countries that use this tech for God knows what end. There was an Emirati activist who ended up in solitary confinement. They literally hacked his baby monitor. What's the baby saying about the Emirates? We gotta know. But yes, when Nicole Perlroth interviews the people from NSO, they claim they only sold to democratic governments, and they claim that every sale was approved by the Israeli Ministry of Defense. So do with that what you will. 2012, the NSA's guiding philosophy on cyber warfare has been NOBUS, N-O-B-U-S, nobody but us.
Quite literally just like American exceptionalism, I guess, right?
Mm-hmm. We can be trusted with these powerful cyber weapons, but nobody else is allowed to have them. It's totally falling apart, right? It's becoming increasingly clear that every other nation is getting in on the cyber weapons race, but the NSA just doubles down, right? They're ramping up their search and stockpiling for ever more 0 days. They're using the boutique contractors. They are not slowing down even one bit. 2013, the NSA develops a game-changing new robot codenamed Turbine to take over the management of its vast apparatus of spying implants, right? Basically, they got the problem that there's too much data. There's too much data out there, and they're collecting too much of it. But listen to how dystopian this sounds. Quoting Perlroth, described internally as an intelligence command and control that would enable industrial scale exploitation. Turbine was designed to operate like the brain. So they have a robot handling the spying. And it was designed to, in the words of one internal NSA memo, relieve the user from needing to know/care about the details. They anticipated that Turbine would manage millions of implants for intelligence gathering and active attack. And by this point, we've kept gesturing towards it. America has the most cyber weapons, but is also the most cyber susceptible. And this is reflected in the allocation of labor. Because at this point, cyber offense outnumbers cyber defense at the NSA by a factor of 2 to 1. And this is bad because, as we all know, cyber defense wins cyber championships. Summer 2013 is the Edward Snowden leaks. So if you remember these, you probably remember that the main controversy was about phone call metadata collection and the revelation that the NSA was spying on basically everyone. US citizens, foreign leaders, didn't matter. But a lot of people, because they're tech peasants like me, they miss that the documents also point towards the NSA's vast collection of 0 days. They miss the fact that they're collecting these 0 days, they're sourcing them from outside the agency. They miss the connections to all this black market stuff. Also 2013, the 0 day trade by this point is so large as to have its own brokers, putting together the sellers and buyers taking cuts, even though it's an entirely off the books black market. It is estimated to have surpassed $5 billion. It is a market that did not exist at all 10 years before.
A lot of this stuff is paid for in Bitcoin, but there was no Bitcoin at the time. It's actually like a lot of it was done just in cash.
Duffel bags full of cash.
Mm-hmm.
This is also the year 2013, once, the leaks are coming out. The NSA adds a $25 million public line item budget for 0 days, which is so fucking cute. This is their idea of transparency. They're like, yes, taxpayers, we spent $25 million, give or take, on cyber weapons. It's like being caught with a heroin problem and being like, fine, you got me. I smoke weed on weekends sometimes, okay? Throughout the book, Nicole Perloff talks a lot about like the ethical problems of where are these cyber weapons going to end up with this completely unregulated, unmonitored black market, right? So in 2015, there's a hack of an Italian IT company called Hacking Team. A very funny name. And so, yeah, the Desautel's guy that we mentioned, the guy who was one of the best brokers, this is where he fucks up and he loses all of his cred in the 0 day market because he was literally going on smell tests. He was like, I only sell to 15% of people that I talk to. Someone tells him, like, sell to these Italians. They're Euros. They won't use your shit for bad purposes. They won't sell it to bad actors. So he sells some 0 days to these Italians. And there's a data breach thanks to a hacker named Phineas Fisher that proved that over the last 12 years, Hacking Team had sold to Pentagon, FBI, DEA, CIA, and a whole bunch of intelligence agencies in Europe. Okay, like Desautel wouldn't mind that, but they also sold to the UAE, to the Saudis, to the Egyptians, the Russian security services, authorities in Morocco, Bahrain, Ethiopia, Nigeria, all the stands of Central Asia, where they know that the hacking tools had been used on innocent civilians and dissidents. They tried to close a deal with Belarus, frequently called the last dictatorship in Europe. It is unclear if they successfully closed the deal with the Bangladeshi death squad they were talking to, and they sold $1 million worth of spyware to Sudan during their genocide in Darfur.
Yeah, so it's like, great, you have a code and you won't sell your 0 day vulnerability to Belarus, right? I only sell to Italians. But it's like, there is literally like nothing stopping that buyer from turning around and selling it to one of these organizations.
Yep. So the last entry in our history lesson, because we're deep out of the 2000s by now, 2016 to 17, a group calling itself the Shadow Brokers, identity still unknown to this day, leaks the NSA's cyber weapons arsenal to the entire world. Any nation state or cyber criminal or terrorist can now pick up and use the NSA's cyber weapons. This is the world we get to live in.
Cool. Let's talk about our themes and big ideas to the topic of cyber warfare in the 2000s.
Yes, we got a lot today. And I think first we got to start with globalization. You know it, you love it. It's the 2000s, it's the end of history. But because everything is connected now through the web, time and again, cyber warfare attacks don't just hit their intended targets. They hit the attackers themselves and bystanders as well. So there's this big Russian attack on Ukraine called the NotPetya attack. I'll discuss it more in our Echoes in the Culture, actually. But basically, This attack doesn't just affect Ukraine. It gets to computers at FedEx and destroys $1 billion worth of value. In the words of The Simpsons, your throwing stick stunt done boomeranged on us and ends up infecting Russian oil companies from their own cyber attack. And one point that Nicole Perlroth makes over and over again is that because of globalization, we all rely on the same technology companies now. Right? The tools and the exploits that the NSA has can just as easily be used on a Pakistani intelligence official or an Al-Qaeda operative, but also American citizens or businesses or critical infrastructure. We all use the same things.
It's a winner-take-all environment for technological products, right? We've always kind of wanted to do a BlackBerry episode, and I think that's the thesis that we would go with, is there really is no market for like the third best of anything anymore, right? We're all going to use the one or two best systems in the world, to the point that, like we saw in the Stuxnet example, Iran's fucking nuclear centrifuges use the Windows operating system.
Yep.
Like, if you find a vulnerability, it's likely that everybody in the world also has this vulnerability.
Yeah. And we're so connected. Iran is probably one of the most politically and diplomatically isolated and economically isolated countries on Earth, what with all the sanctions and its status as a pariah state. It's like them, Cuba, North Korea. And yet, everything's so connected to the internet that the worm got back at us. It's so different from what came before. We're back in the Cold War. The US and the Soviet didn't even use the same typewriters. This might be because their languages use different alphabets, but it's like the technology was so different that they use. And then the whole like obsession with free trade and connectedness of globalization, it also trickles all the way down to this 0-day black market where the buyers, the sellers, and the brokers are from all over the world. We just saw this with the story of the Italian firm Hacking Team. American broker buys a 0-day, sells it to an Italian IT company to develop into an exploit, which then sells it to Sudan to help them do a genocide, right?
Yeah, wow.
Thomas Friedman in absolute shambles right now, right? Globalization's great. No two countries with a McDonald's have ever gone to war. It's like, well, here's a different way that globalization can work. And of course, our globalized world has resulted in these enormous multinational corporations, especially in the world of tech. And we start to get these blurred lines between public and private, like Project Aurora, where a nation state hacks big companies who don't have the resources and tools to resist it. This doesn't happen without our like massively globalized world. This wouldn't happen in a world where every country has their own Google. And the fact that everything is connected via the internet is what's going to lead to our next two themes. The next one being the problems of the tech oligopoly and freelancing. So one of the many big problems with the NSA stockpiling 0 days for these major multinational companies based in America is that it's not like they can just be used to hack America's enemies. Remember, the author is a NatSec lib. Yeah, like Jordan already said, Iran's nuclear programs run Windows. Oil companies can change the pressure on their temperature gauges on oil rigs with a fucking iPad, is something she pointed out. Imagine you're a parent of an iPad child and you're also an oil exec. And it's like your toddler led to the fucking next BP spill. The fact that there are so few companies in this oligopoly means that the hacking potential is just too lucrative. One part of the reason that the government never felt any need to regulate this entire industry is the fact that the payoffs for hacking Google are just too lucrative. Everyone uses the Google suite of projects. Everyone has a smartphone. I don't know how many Facebook users there are. I know at one point I know it was 2 billion. And I did check this morning. 97% of internet browser users use 6 specific browsers. If you can hack one of these companies for data, the payoff is just too great, which is yet another reason we should break up the tech companies. No more Alphabet, no more Meta. Break into small stuff.
I was just thinking about how, everybody is going to use Windows XP from like Iran to the Baltimore municipal government, right? That was probably like one of the funnier hacking stories from the last 5 years remember when like a ransomware attack hit Baltimore City, and they ended up having to pay like millions of dollars because it shut down all of their systems because they were using Windows XP still, right? People are not updating their systems, and the people often in charge of these sorts of things are not very tech savvy. It just creates this perfect storm of incentive plus disincentive to make people vulnerable.
Yeah, they're all fucking old on top of like just generally not being tech savvy. The third big idea we want to talk about is just the idea of freelancing, where we saw so much of our story depends on freelancing in various ways, right? But what do I mean by this? I mean, there's a million independent contractors rather than big institutions, other than the NSA, who's taking advantage of the freelancers. So they are going to outsource their zero-day trade with what they call their commercial partners and security partners. These are unnamed hackers. If there is one thing that this book is about, it is about the black and gray markets between hackers and government agencies buying and stockpiling various zero-day hacks. This is a whole world of a bunch of independent contractors. These freelancers are very often motivated by money. Nicole Perlroth does a lot of hand-wringing about what if these end up in the wrong hands, by which she means Russia or Iran. But there's a really good chapter late in the book where she goes to Argentina, to like a hacking collective, hacking conference thing in Argentina. And she describes how Argentinians have a thriving hacking culture because they all have really good technical education, but their economy has many problems, mostly due to various kinds of inflation and like mismanaged protectionism. I'm not up on all the details of how Argentina got to where it is, but she asks this older Argentinian man, are you only going to sell to good Western governments? And this guy is scandalized because the US supported the Argentinian military junta in the late 70s and early 80s. And he's like, no, there are no good Western governments. I'm going to sell to whoever I can get the most money for. We also see this in other countries that use freelance volunteers or sometimes even conscripts. I think Russia is the big one. Quoting Perlroth here again, Putin laid down only 2 rules for Russian hackers. First, no hacking inside the motherland. And second, when the Kremlin calls in a favor, you do whatever it asks. Otherwise, hackers had full autonomy, right? It's dispersed, it's decentralized, it's independent, it's motivated by money changing hands, and the NSA, as like the only non-freelance institution in the game for a very long time, is able to play its hand extremely well.
Yeah, that's such a good point. That when we think about the changing nature of warfare in the 2000s with CyberWarfare, Russia and North Korea, they know they cannot match the traditional military, but there's this new avenue that not only does the United States have this, quote, soft underbelly, but also it's so much less hierarchical than the traditional military. Like, its form is much more like the gig economy, right? Independent contractors. What a better encapsulation of our modern economic system compared to, the traditional military of the past, that it's like, yeah, we have all of these non-hierarchical like gig workers that we kind of hire to do warfare. Like the position of like a soldier has existed for thousands of years, and it's been hierarchical and often like salaried or paid in a certain way. And now the 2000s gets the soldier that it deserves, which is the gig economy soldier.
The gig economy digital soldier of fortune.
Yeah.
Yeah, like you saw from our history lesson, it's only very, very late in the story that some of the big tech firms try to start and find a way to formalize and legitimize this outsourcing of bug finding, almost certainly because the government is not going to step in. Speaking of which, our next big idea that we have over the course of the story, we saw the changing role of tech vendors from absolutely useless to better ? So we saw at the beginning of the story, they didn't anticipate the problems that the internet would present. They were trying to bury their heads in the sand. They were trying to sue the well-intentioned hackers who were trying to help them produce better products. And these companies are always motivated by the profit motive, of course.
Right.
And early in the game, the most profitable thing to do is to release the substandard products and sue the people calling you out on your bullshit. But over the course of the 2000s, as this world of cyber warfare, cybersecurity really starts to spin up, security starts to be good for business and tech companies start to take it more seriously, especially after the Snowden leaks reveal that not only were they collaborating with the NSA. If you were to be a defender of these companies, you'd be like, well, there were secret court orders. They had to. But like, They collaborated very willingly with the NSA. But the Snowden leaks also showed that they got hacked by the NSA. They were good little collaborationists, and it still didn't help them from being hacked. And so once they realized that this Pandora's box has been opened by the cyberweapons black market, they really do step up their game. And it kills me to say this because I don't want to do any apologia for big tech. They are overwhelmingly bad for the world. But there are a few moments where they actually do kind of fight a good fight for civil liberties. Like there's a story where after the San Bernardino shooting in 2014, the government, the FBI, is leaning on Apple to unlock an iPhone of the perpetrators to get all of the data. And Tim Cook and Apple and them, they like stand their ground and they're willing to go all the way up to the Supreme Court. And do you remember how this story ends, Giordano? What the FBI does? They pay for a fucking 0 day.
Really?
They pay
oh my
over
God.
$1 million for a 0 day, and they drop the litigation that they had to force Apple to let them in because they just hacked it on their own. And yeah, what a grim fucking world that we live in where the tech oligopoly is more concerned with privacy than the actual government, right? Like the government is always going to say privacy gets in the way of law enforcement. And we care more about law enforcement and national security than we do privacy rights. Our next big theme is just like whistleblowing. Basically, the only reason we know as much as we do is thanks to whistleblowers and the good folks at the newsroom. And I'm totally open to this being just some selection bias because our main source here is a self-promoting journalist. She loved going on little asides about my colleague at the Times, blah, 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 blah. But throughout our story, we see the Edward Snowden leaks show the tip of the iceberg of what the NSA is after. The Italian hacking team leak is the only way we could have come to know that this company was enabling a genocide through its surveillance tech. The story behind NSO and Pegasus is also something that we got through a confidential leak and some gumshoe reporting. And I know I've complained a lot about this book throughout this episode, but if half of what Nicole Pearl-Ross says about this world is true, the fact that this book exists is actually an incredible feat of journalism. And also, I'll say like a huge testament to some very brave whistleblowers because they're whistleblowing on the deep state, on like people selling weapons to authoritarian regimes.
Yeah, I mean, she mentions that she was hacked several times after she started reporting on this. You are putting a target on your back by writing a book like this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, there are a bunch of noxious real-world effects to whistleblowing. I mean, Edward Snowden paid the price. He's still in Russia, stuck there. And like the event that we ended our history episode with, eventually the hackers got hacked. And all of the NSA's cyber weapons are out there for anyone to use. Next big theme is just total deregulation. And I know we've hit this note a lot over the course of this episode, but think about it this way. Other kinds of weapons sale is regulated. The US won't sell or allow the sale of certain weapons to certain places. I don't know if you know this, Giordano, but we went into Iraq to make sure the wrong weapons didn't end up in the wrong hands.
Right.
This is not true of cyber weapons, and it's largely because the US is the largest single purchaser of cyber weapons in the black market, though there are, of course, many other states in the game. The closest they ever came to regulating cyber weapons is something called the Wassenaar Agreement. It's named after a town in the Netherlands. This passed in 1996, and it was about regulating the sale of dual-use goods and technologies. That's anything that can have both a military and a civilian application. And in 2015, they tried to add surveillance tech, intrusion software, and cyber weapons to the list of regulated things. They tried to codify it in U.S. law under the arrangement, and big tech raised a fit. The Electronic Frontier Foundation was not having it, but the most vocal critics were from the $1.7 billion penetration testing industry. This is where white hats get paid to hack their clients' systems with exploits and intrusion tools to try and harden their defenses. Basically, cybersecurity firms lobbied against regulating the export of cyber weapons. And I learned that the cybersecurity industry is called penetration testing. And I was like, hell yeah, brother. How do I get into penetration testing? So yeah, the attempt at regulation fails. US doesn't get in on it. Few of its allies do either. And when the EU tries to do some ticky-tacky regulation of cyber weapons, all those European hackers, they just move to DC. They just move to the Beltway where all the boutique contractors are.
Yeah, it's crazy that that's the center. Like, if you want to start any kind of cybersecurity firm or like just being someone who develops zero-day exploits and sells them, they're all based in DC. Like that's where the buyers are.
Yep. Literally across the street from the Pentagon on the Virginia side, across the highway, you will see the skyscraper building headquarters of all the major defense contractors. You'll see Boeing, you'll see Lockheed Martin, quite literally across the street. They're not even trying to hide it. I want to sell as a barnacle on the state, as a military industrial contractor, but I don't want a big commute, you know?
The NSA spying building in New York, you can actually see as you're going into Manhattan on the Manhattan Bridge. It's on the right side. It's like a building that is probably 8 times taller than any other building around it. And you know it's the NSA building because there's probably 70 floors and not a single one has windows.
Damn.
Yeah.
Our next big theme is maybe my favorite. It's a theme that's just called "We're fucked" / overdependence on tech. So this is a big part of the book, right? It's called "This Is How They Tell Me the World Ends." And basically the idea is that nobody in America really takes cyber warfare seriously, and that the US is the most vulnerable nation on earth to cyber warfare. When Ukraine gets hit with a cyber attack, they have not spent the last 20-something years plugging every single fucking device into the internet. There's no internet-enabled fridges in Ukraine, to my knowledge, or baby monitors. Our cars connect to the internet, right? Like pacemakers, stoves, refrigerators, insulin pumps are all web-enabled.
At the beginning of this episode, I mentioned that the book might have been called "This Is How the World Could End." And I think that the point Nicole is making is that our country is incredibly vulnerable, and like this is a big problem. It's not a problem until you go to war with someone. And like the issue is that the United States really hasn't been at war with someone who was going to do a successful cyber attack, right? Other than like North Korea with a Sony hack. But the point she's making is that what we see in the Ukraine is that you can shut down hospitals, nuclear stations, chemical plants, oil refineries. And like, that's exactly what would happen to the United States if we ever went to war with someone, is likely all of our infrastructure would be scrambled. Because imagine Y2K anxiety over how much of our society would be shut down because like the date isn't in the right format. But now the actor is nefarious rather than this just being a numerical accident.
Right.
You know?
100%, yeah. Apparently 127 devices per second are plugged into the internet in America. Like, we are not de-internetifying. There's no Luddite way out of this. Just got to make stuff more secure and don't go to war with a state who has big cyber capabilities. Yeah, like we saw with the Stuxnet. When the US and Israelis attempted a more slapdash attack, you know what the Iranians did to stop it? They fucking unplugged everything. We got to stop web enabling everything.
Russia, for example, like wouldn't necessarily attack our infrastructure until it's necessary because you don't really get anything out of doing an attack other than the fact that you like improve your opponent's defenses, right? You might cause like a temporary disruption, but they will fix it eventually. And now you've made the system stronger. And so I think like a lot of the vulnerability is often left there until it's necessary to take advantage of it. Because the second you do take advantage of it, you're actually creating a situation where you can't do that again.
Right. Yeah. It's a one and done weapon. Next big theme, which I think has been abundantly clear from the history lesson, is that this problem that we're faced, this whole "we're fucked" problem, is a product of the national security state. This theme or big idea is just called "The Deep State Made This Problem." The NSA, before the Shadow Brokers leak, had the most powerful and invisible cyber arsenal on Earth. It was the largest government program you had never heard of, right? If you think about the fact that at a certain point, this cyber weapons trade is worth $5 billion a year and is entirely off the books. Who knows how much money went into it. They're buying stuff through shell companies, mercenaries, freelancers, black budgets, non-disclosure agreements, giant duffel bags full of cash to collect all of this stuff.
You hear about all this and you're like, I don't actually believe that you think Saddam Hussein had nuclear weapons, right? Yeah, we just talked about how over the decade, you know, you increase the size of all of these government agencies to be able to spy effectively everywhere. And it's like, you still didn't know that he didn't have weapons of mass destruction? Like, I call bullshit.
Yeah. He didn't have an iPhone yet. The hubris of the American deep state is the most staggering thing to me. I mentioned that their system was called Nobus. Nobody but us, right? The premise behind Nobus was that any low-hanging fruit that they find should be fixed, turned over to the vendors for patching. But more advanced exploits would remain in the secret agency stockpile. They could use it to spy on Americans. They could use it to degrade their enemy's systems in the case of CyberWarfare. And there's a chapter late in the book where Nicole Perlroth is interviewing someone from the Obama administration. And he's basically like, yeah, we make a call. We find a 0 day and we think like, how much do our enemies use this system? Oh, they don't use it a lot? Okay, we'll give it to the tech vendors to patch. Oh, our enemies use the system a lot? Let's just hang on to this little thing, all right? Totally just like going on vibes. And I think the hubris is there in that, how are you going to spend so much time dealing with these faulty systems and think, yeah, we can keep all this in-house. No one could ever hack us. We're the only ones who could hack. Our last theme, finally. I know it's been like an 8-theme episode. Geopolitics and strategery. Where, yes, we've hit this note already. I think the author sometimes overstates the dangers of cyber warfare. But nevertheless, I think there are some really interesting bits about how different countries use cyber warfare. So Russia, it plays with the cyber weapons really well. They've been using Ukraine as a test kitchen since 2014. They love to spread like anti-vax propaganda. They love the fact that their enemies are democracies because you can just make the Facebook posts and just like sow dissent that way, you know? Iran brought down US banking websites. They obliterated computers at the Las Vegas Sands Casino after Sheldon Adelson, the CEO of the Sands Casino, publicly said that Washington should nuke Iran. They just bricked his computers. There's a story where they hack into Aramco, basically, and they replace all the data just with an image of a burning American flag. I was like, damn, got their ass. And of course, the famous North Korea leak of Sony Pictures torching American servers, hacking Sony's emails because of a Seth Rogen and James Franco film. So all different sorts of ways to use cyber warfare. Okay, so let's move on to our closing thoughts, our echoes in the culture. I think the biggest one is that this is the exciting new world that we get to live in. In practice, you can look at the various Russian cyber warfare attacks on Ukraine. So like 2014 after Euromaidan, they're doing Classico style. They're doing the disinformation. They're calling it a deep state plot. They're stealing voter registration. They're trying to hack the voter machines, yada, yada, yada. Ukraine does their election on paper. 2015, they shut down the power for just 6 hours just to tell them that they know that they can. First time a cyber attack had ever hit the grid on a state-by-state level. 2016, another big one. They turn off the lights and the power in Kyiv, in the capital. And 2017 is the biggest one yet. It's an attack called the NotPetya attack on Ukraine's Independence Day. This attack is the one that was made possible by the shadow brokers giving Russia the NSA stockpile. And this one, it shuts down government agencies, railways, ATMs, gas stations, the postal service, the radiation monitors at Chernobyl, they all get shut down. People are freaking out. I already mentioned it cost FedEx $1 billion. When the author interviews Ukrainians about their 21st century Chernobyl, which is what she calls this, I think the Ukrainians probably have a different 21st century calamity that they're thinking about now. This book came out before 2022. The main thing that everybody remembers about this is the speed, just how quickly every fucking thing went down. The crazy thing about NotPetya is that this was the Russians pulling their punches, she claims. No planes fell out of the sky, nothing exploded. The damage was low compared to what it could have been. So we're starting to see the rollout of cyber warfare in hot wars between Ukraine and Russia.
Yeah, and that's, I think, the interesting part about the echoes in the culture is you might be sitting there wondering, like, well, how does this affect the average person? And I think it doesn't really affect the average person, but the people it does affect are very affected, right? So it's like, if you have something that is worth spying on, like you are a political dissident, then it really affects you, right? Or like if you live in Ukraine, if you're living in a country where cyber warfare is being done to you, like then it affects you. And so there's this asymmetry in like who is affected. It's not like the cultural effects of Shrek or something that we're talking about here.
Okay, Jordan, we need to ask ourselves, did the Russian leaking of the DNC emails cost Hillary the election?
True. That is a good point, actually.
I mean, I have been on record on this pod saying that a big part of the reason she lost is that she was one of the weakest possible candidates the Democratic Party could have chosen. But part of that is what was in her emails. But her emails, right?
Right. True. But yeah, every time you do like a two-factor authentication, you know, to log into your Burger King Points app or something, that is an echo in the culture of this cyber warfare.
I've been listening to this audiobook for fun, not for the pod, called More Everything Forever, AI Overlords, Space Empires, and Silicon Valley's Crusade to Control the Fate of Humanity by Adam Becker. Strong recommend. It's really just like about the ideology of contemporary Silicon Valley. So If you're a regular Chapo or TrueAnon listener, you know the deal. He's talking about the effective altruists. He's talking about the rationalist community. He's talking about the transhumanists and the people who believe in the singularity. And so some of these folks want to pour money into making sure that AI doesn't destroy the world. A super intelligent AI could end the world. And we need to pour money into this, not into solving social problems now, but to solving the future problems of our super intelligent AI. And the massive gaping blind spot in their thinking about the misuse of tech is that it's happening now. Like the tech is being misused now. And I thought a lot about this book and this take while I was researching for this episode. Nicole Perlroth is trying to ring alarm bells for the future, but what we needed was this call in the 2000s. The toothpaste is out of the tube, the genie's out of the bottle, the cat's out of the bag, a fourth turn of phrase. We can't solve it now. The leaks have happened. The weapons have been developed. If only we had scattered the NSA to the winds decades ago, we might not be in this boat. On that happy note, here's your call to action. Run your updates, choose a long password, turn on your multi-factor authentication. I know it's annoying. And never, ever click a link, ever, is what I've learned.
Yeah, that link clicking seems to get a lot of people. They can very easily, it seems like, put something on your device. But also, yeah, Nicole Perlroth mentions that like the best thing you can do to prevent or at least mitigate your hacking vulnerability is to just turn on two-factor authentication. Because that does happen quite frequently, that, you know, your phone is like, hey, are you trying to log in right now from Israel? I thought that was a good call to action. I guess something that's changed in the last 10 years.
Yeah. And on that happy note, this has been Remember Shuffle, CyberWarfare, cybersecurity, spiritual sequel to drones. Much like drones, not a very happy topic, but one that I found way more interesting than a story about computers has any right to be. So thanks for listening. As always, please like, please subscribe, please write us a comment. We really love the comments. I say it every time. It makes our day reading them. And we'll catch you next time. Check out our Patreon. By the time this goes up, we will have released an episode on Goodbye Lenin, the Nostalgie film from 2003. And watch this space for us talking about some 2000s hacking films.
Yeah, I watched Die Hard 4 recently, and that movie is so insane. We saw that in high school together, and it's about our infrastructure being completely susceptible to a hack. It's sort of perfect fitting for this topic. Yeah, so look out for that, and potentially a discussion of Swordfish, which has some interesting politics as well, on the Patreon.
Yeah. All right, that's all we got for you today. Ciao, ciao.
Peace.